afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this week's Middle East and Africa Forum for Sustainability Leaders podcast, where we take a deeper dive into this massive acceleration that we're seeing across the region towards sustainability, of course, across the world, trying to uncover insights and intelligence for our community to help them navigate the challenges and road ahead. We're joined here today, of course, with our host, Sharif Taufik, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer, Middle East and Africa at Microsoft, and our three distinguished guest speakers, May Yassin, Head of Sustainable Business at Vodafone Egypt and Secretary General at the Vodafone Egypt Foundation. We also have Ali Hujay, who is the Principal at BCG, and we have Dr. Ahmed Al-Fadel, Chief Technologies at the Research Products Development Company, which is the National Center for Technology Development and Commercialization in Saudi Arabia. The critical question that we're tackling today is pinpointing tech, how to identify specific solutions for achieving sustainability goals. Sharif, I just wanted to first kick off with you as our host to get your opening comments on the overall topic that we're addressing today.
Thank you, Brian. Actually, the topic of this podcast is very dear to my heart. At Microsoft, our mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. I think the planet here is the operative word. We need a healthy planet for us to do good and to achieve our mission. This is why, as a technology company, we are very committed to empower our customers and partners with technology platforms and solutions to help them achieve real and tangible progress in their sustainability journey and to help all of us create a more sustainable future together. When we look at the technology needs for sustainable transformation, we look at it at several stages. There is stage one, which is basically customers would need sustainable IT solutions. You need IT, but you need IT solutions that are sustainable by design. Second, to progress anything, you need to measure it. You cannot progress what you cannot measure. Hence, the measurement and the recording and reporting tools are crucial for any customer to achieve sustainable outcomes. Then, after you measure and record the reports, you need to optimize and prioritize what exactly will be reducing or replacing in terms of systems to greener ones. And this is why artificial intelligence, machine learning platforms are crucial for customers to be able to prioritize which exactly of their systems will replace or even tackle to reduce. Then after that, they need innovation and scale. And if you make something or move something, it's better off that you simulate this over digital twins or industrial metaverse for you to be able to move and make in the most efficient, sustainable manner. Hence, technologies like industrial metaverse, digital twins are crucial for innovation and scale. Finally, for transformation, we've seen ChatGPT and generative AI taking the world by storm. Hence, we expect multiple amazing use cases for sustainability enabled by generative AI and ChatGPT. Things like supply chain transformation, environmental monitoring, compliance, advisory, and auditing, and sustainable designs. I think you should expect those use cases coming in the near future with this new breadth of technology. Glad to be hosting this podcast on how tech can help in achieving sustainability goals with our esteemed guests, Dr. Ahmed, May, and Ali. Over to you, Brian, to kick off this amazing podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharif. I just wanted to first bring in May, of course, to get your opening comments. As Sharif mentioned, a lot of solutions out there at the moment. Where do you see, from your opening side of view, how to identify specific solutions for sustainability goals and where we're currently at in the region?
Very honestly, it's evolving much quicker than we thought, which is great, but a lot of work is still to be done. So we have a lot of solutions, be it, as she just said, for carbon counting, for reporting as well. They need a lot of marketing to it. They need a lot of adoption. They need a lot of capacity buildings as well within the companies. So there is a lot of solutions that are out there. A lot of solutions as well are being there without being marketed, that they are for sustainability delivery. For example, let's say IoT. IoT saves energy. IoT saves a lot of things. However, when they're usually marketed, it's very rare that we find them promoted or marketed at with what they bring into the community or what they bring into the planet. So there are a lot of solutions out there. For example, we shouldn't neglect that technology is a key enabler to um, to reduce the urban-rural divide, for the gender gap as well, digital gender gap. However, we really need to adopt that and know the benefit out of it to be able to scale it. So, and a lot with this comes a lot of capacity buildings within the companies, comes a lot of learnings that we need to do, as well as a lot of courage. Being ahead of the curve and being a company that is purpose-led as Vodafone, a lot of courage comes with that to be ahead of the curve. Focusing on the future rather than focusing on now, finding a sweet spot between what we can do well and do good, how we can do well and do good. So a lot of things are there in the market, a lot of technologies. However, I do see that a lot of marketing needs to be done for that, on how it brings back to the community rather than the commercial benefit out of it, as well as a lot of capacity building and learning that needs to be increased as well.
And where do you think the first steps in that journey begins? You know, there's a lot of technology. We see headlines every day. There's also the education process for stakeholders on, you know, here's my problem, what's my best solution? And of course, then again, engaging with communities. In terms of when you say there's a lot of things that need to be done with the marketing aspect and the communication aspect, what do you think is a low-hanging fruit that we can focus on?
Very honestly, how this brings good for the community as well as the planet. And this is something that we need to start focusing on. In addition to any commercial benefit, we need to start focusing on how can we do a commercial benefit without harming the planet, with ensuring that we have a better future for the communities to come. So I think this is where it should start, and with a purpose strategy, with a sustainability strategy for the companies, them believing on how they can do both together, in addition to the courage, because they will definitely have to give up some benefit on a short term, looking for one that is more on the longer term. So having courage to do so, this is where it should start. And then comes the capacity building, and the innovation is already there. It's developing as well, and it's becoming more and more mature of the solutions that are there. But they have to, let's start with education and awareness and then move to that part.
So, Dr. Ahmed, I just want to bring you in as well for your opening comments. Of course, you play a big role in that aspect of creating solutions and then, of course, communicating, educating, and commercializing those solutions in Saudi Arabia. What are your opening comments on the topic that we're tackling today?
So, yeah, thank you very much for having me. Actually, this is a very important topic, and I'm trying to link it with our range of business. We are working in the technology development and commercialization, and this is a challenge. I mean, we're not only talking about IT technologies, but the broad range of deep tech coming from robotics, advanced materials, in addition to software and then another IT and AI solutions. So the question is, how could an organization figure out which technology would have the highest impact? What are the main parameters of the technology that will achieve the sustainability goal? So this is a real challenge, which creates opportunities as we see it for the local innovation ecosystem to create competitive solutions that could be adopted and eventually acquired by those companies. So usually for innovation, there are two critical components to make this happen. First, we need to obtain the cutting edge technologies, and usually universities and R&D centers, they generate this kind of innovation. But this requires significant funding, support from the government, as well as support from the industry. Luckily, in Saudi Arabia and other regional, like other places in the region, there are several universities and R&D centers that are very active, and they generate cutting edge technologies, and they do impactful research, but they're still producing non-mature technologies. And this is where the second component is very critical. How can we advance those technologies and that are generated from the universities? How can we achieve sufficient maturity, product market fit? How can we have the competitive advantage when comparing this technology to the existing solutions? So this is challenging, and it's really actually missing from many of the regional innovation ecosystems, and that's where we're trying to provide our support in. And it's a complex journey, and it's a complex intervention between the technical and the business aspects. Again, this journey requires specific skill sets, specific capabilities, sufficient funding, and most important, adoption from the industry. Technologies at this stage are in what we call the valley of death. So it's a high risk and high uncertainty phase, but it's usually that's where the high reward comes in. So in the innovation ecosystem, we have the entrepreneurs who like they do have the passion and they believe in their ideas. Investors at that phase, they operate at the high risk, high reward aspect of the journey. And then there is the support services from the ecosystem. So all these components are very important to make this happen. But for organizations, this is not an easy path. I really believe that they need to fund technologies at this early stage, and they might need actually to get into an array of multiple technologies for a specific problem to ensure meeting the sustainability goal in the long term while being cost effective and competitive. And then an additional layer of challenge once the technology is proven and identified as a clear winner. The process for acquiring that technology, taking the license, it's a delicate strategic decision. It has technical, legal, so many different aspects. So I see that it's not only a technology problem, it's a set of actions that needs to happen at all levels in organizations. So I hope that makes sense.
In terms of developing that ecosystem, you mentioned adoption by industry, but do you think that there needs to be closer collaboration from industry with academia on research? We talk about applied research versus theoretical research. And May also mentioned in her comments, everything's accelerating so fast with new technologies. Are you currently seeing that collaboration enhance, or do you think there's still steps to go? And if that collaboration improves, that would also facilitate into further adoption down the road.
Well, yeah, this is a very important aspect. Actually, it is sector driven as we see it. For example, in the oil and gas sector, many of the R&D happening, especially in universities like FUTM and CAUS, etc., it's a market pull. Like oil and gas companies, they come in, they demonstrate their challenge, and they look for, like, they fund actually the research project that's going to offer them the solution. And usually those kind of technologies, they are the most successful that make it all the way as a product that could be deployed. We are trying to help universities take their patents, take their technologies, and work toward the technology push. And usually, I mean, even though we can manage to work towards the de-risking, but the failure rate is still very high because we're trying to make a product market fit out of a research. Maybe it's not really like resolving the main issue or the main concern an industry needs. Other sectors beyond the oil and gas, like in Saudi Arabia, for example, we don't have many different industries. Luckily, it's growing with the new vision, with the encouragement to have, like in the automotive and the in aviation and all these new sectors that promote adopting technologies and the manufacturing. This is going to change in the future, but currently, I only see the sectors that are very active in Saudi Arabia and in the region. They are doing this correctly by having the market pull and like establishing this industry academia kind of alliance and partnership. And this is the right thing that should happen across the entire R&D ecosystem.
Ali, I just want to bring you in as well, of course, with your background on energy, sustainability, and digitalization, to get your opening comments of where you see the current state of play regarding the topic, and of course, the stakeholders that you were engaging with.
Thanks a lot, Brian, and for having me today and for your esteemed guests. So, Brian, first, allow me to just reflect on what my colleagues have been saying and also on Sharif's introductory remarks. So, when I look at the impact of digital and sustainability and climate action, I mean, also we are in a year where COP28 is going to be in the UAE. COP27 was in close by in Egypt. So it's a year also of sustainability here in the UAE as well. So there's a lot of traction on the topic. And when I look at how digital can help, I want to look at a bit more holistic view. So I want to start with the pillars of the Paris Agreement and what do we need to do. We start with mitigation, which I think, Sharif, you covered extremely well, with everything from thinking about how we measure, how we reduce, how we decide, how we report and innovate within the mitigation, which its basically its goal is to reduce, the amount of greenhouse gases and make sure we are within 1.5 degrees by mid-century. And then the next element I also want to think about is also adaptation, right? This other, especially we're in a country, we're in a region has an arid climate that's bound to be hit by the impacts of climate change. So we should not also forget the impact and how do we adapt to climate change and make our environment resilient. So basically everything here, from our resilient infrastructure, agriculture, food systems, water, health, all these topics are, what we see, what our clients, what CEOs are talking about, where governments are also talking about. These are major concerns and major things that, people are talking about and CEOs are talking about in their planning going forward. And then finally, as well as we go into, from adaptation resilience towards that loss and damage element, or where you get, things that you cannot adapt to are hitting you. Now, how do you basically react, and how you, maneuver and do things differently? And then finally, underpinning all of this, the finance and the money that you need to fund the journey towards 2050 and beyond. So these are the 4 pillars, and I see digital playing a big impact across these 4 elements. I think our colleagues talked a lot about the mitigation, so I'm not going to repeat, but obviously energy efficiency is a main element. If you look at any scenario that's going to keep us within 1.5 or even 2 degrees, there's a massive energy efficiency gains that we need to make. How can we have massive energy efficiency gains if we're still going to grow our GDP and population is growing? We need to basically, do more output with less energy. And that basically means, all our robotics, our AI, our artificial intelligence, everything we need to do around all of that to make sure our operations are basically 100% efficient. We have no leaks in our anywhere in our productivity, and everything around that needs to be basically super tight. So that's, let's say, on the mitigation. Obviously many other things happen. Now on adaptation, which I want to also highlight, basically this is something that could help us realize how we can build a business case for climate change, right? So for example, how can we assess the impacts of climate? There's many things we need to look at. One is the climate risk, so physical risk. If there's a drought, there's a flood, what does that mean for me, for my company, for my city, for my for my building? You can take it at many scales for my community. And then there is how vulnerable are my business models. So take a corporation, take a country, take a federal government. Are my food supply chains vulnerable to climate change? If the country that I'm importing food on is going to be hit by climate impacts, and it's basically agricultural yield are going to go down, that's going to impact my food security, even though it's 1,000 miles away from me. So basically, how digital can help in these it's building a digital twin, let's say, of the world, more or less, right? And there's models out there that already started doing a lot of that. Basically, you can simulate what can you do, and you simulate scenarios. If I build a city, a wall here, a coastal wall, what's the cost benefit analysis on the short and the long term? All these things that are actually happening right now, and we see at the government level, at the federal level, at an organization level, because these risks also impact corporations. There's business risks, business model risks that needs to be also taken into account. So that's a bit of a holistic view as well. And then finally, on the action side, there's all this push on early warning and action systems. These are all systems also leveraging AI, IoT, to basically give alarms and actions for people who live in remote areas. They're going to be impacted potentially by floods, by everything, that by heavy rain, etc., by waves. And how can you predict when that's going to happen and have the right measures in place to basically protect your people and your crops?
I just wanted to follow up on that, focusing in on the industry stakeholder space, right? Inevitably, in order to take advantage of these solutions, organizations have to have their digitalization strategy intact. Right now, again, there's a lot of options out there. And when looking at that strategy aligned with sustainability, what are the ABC's first step to even approach that challenge? What should you be looking at? Is it identifying the problem first and really focusing on what that problem is? or is it accelerating and adopting solutions and pivoting as you go?
Excellent question, Brian. For me, I think the way we look at this is, number one, digital is helping your sustainability strategy, right? So what's your purpose? So that's you start with that as number one. So every successful strategy has to be purpose driven. So that's our anchor. That's the anchor for the end-to-end transformation program that I need to have, a sustainability transformation program. So we start with that as number one. And then after that, we look at, do I have the enabling leadership? Do I have effective leadership that takes and cascades that vision down to the organization and really have that embedded within, the scorecards of people, basically, the vision statement, the communication, everything around it? Is that purpose being lived by the organization day in and day out? Do I have the right teams? Do I have the right capabilities to build that and to deliver on that? And then do I have the right performance tracking, the everything around basically making sure that initiatives and vision are translated into action? And then for me, I look at solutions. After I've set up the right ingredients, the right purpose, the right vision, the right team, the right caliber, and then I look, there's plenty of solutions out there. And then I look into, what do I need to pursue that vision? And then here, I think, Sharif, you said it very brilliantly at the beginning. If it's not measured, I cannot know how to act on it, right? So you need to have the baseline. What's the problem I want to solve? Where is my impact? And then the digital tools provided most of the time this end-to-end solution that measures your scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions from the beginning. Then look at basically what are the potential levers that you can pull to reduce emissions, and then do a cost benefit analysis, combine that with the impact and the risk that I talked about a bit earlier, that can give you a business case. Because I think one of the things that are very important is that why these things get lost is with a lot of these things, they're not always a valid, pure business case. A lot of the times it's a CO2 reduction that I'm having, and then do I put an internal price on CO2 at the organization? Do I do something else to ensure that this is business valid? Is the other element of the game that I need to look at.
May, I just want to bring you back in, of course, touching on that key aspect of developing purpose, and of course, which you definitely hit on in your opening comments. Can you share a bit more of your experience with Vodafone and, of course, the foundation on what you went through in trying to establish and identify what that purpose was?
Yeah, I actually I reflected a lot when Ali as well as Ahmed were discussing this. Very honestly, before even reflecting on the purpose at Vodafone, which is the main strategic pillar within what we do as a company. One thing you mentioned earlier, Brian, that I want to reflect on is the different sectors that should work on this. And very honestly, I do see this not only a private or an industry thing. It's more of a cross-sectorial and government thing that everyone should work on, because no one government, no one company, or no one industry can do that alone. This change has to happen within all the organizations or all the ecosystem to be able to achieve it. So it has to happen across governments, industries, companies as well. Going back to Vodafone, actually, we're a purpose-led company, and this is our strategy. Says we're a purpose-led company, and we connect for a better future. We work on people's welfare, leaving absolutely no one behind. We utilize our technology and connectivity. But let me tell you how we see this from a digital perspective, or how we embed this, starting from the very basics of having the infrastructure to connect people, and having the infrastructure, because we cannot say that we want to digitize the Egypt, for example, where we don't have the connectivity or the infrastructure. So we start by having the connectivity and the infrastructure, and we move on the education part and ensuring that after they have access, they're educated on how to utilize digital technologies, starting from the farmers, for example, as well, if we're talking about food security. And then after educating them, we start providing the digital technologies or transformations needed, and we start embedding it within their lives. For example, the IoT for the simple farmer on how to utilize the energy, to utilize water, crops, etc., and to ensure that he has the food security for sustainability for the coming generations. And then after educating, we start as well embedding more digital technologies like services for the SMEs, or knowledge centers for the SMEs or the startups, to be able to have local production, for example, or local marketplaces, and moving ahead to that. So for us, digital technologies or digital is a crucial infrastructure part that should be there to move forward for the sustainability and the welfare of the economy. And when we talk about what we do as a company, I loved as well how Ali was stating how this happens, or how this should happen in organizations, because it's a culture change inside. So when we look at the leadership, as Ali just mentioned, it should be a culture change, not only the scorecards of the people, but the scorecards of the leadership as well. ESG and sustainability shouldn't be for reporting, or like how we see it at the end of the year, no, or how we report on it. It should be embedded within when they wake up every day. What do they do for the welfare of the company, or the welfare on the communities they work at, as well as ensuring that the commercial success of the company doesn't come on the cost of the planet. So it's a culture change. We're currently undertaking that in Vodafone Egypt, very honestly. We report on sustainability, we report on ESG for the past couple of years, but having it as a culture change, and what they do, as each and every function has KPIs, clear KPIs that reflects on our purpose, is something that we're currently doing within Vodafone Egypt. So moving beyond the commercial success, how can we support, for example, and this is something we're working on with Sharif and Microsoft, how we can support SMEs and SOHOs and startups to have the sustainability journey as well. How can we advocate their learning or expedite their learning within this area? Is part of our role, being connected to the number of SMEs in Egypt. It's not only to making them digitally advanced, but as well advocating or expediting their learning within this journey. So this is something as well we're working on. So if you're asking me about a Vodafone, we're by nature a purpose-led company. What we're trying to do now is embedding this within the culture as well of all the employees we have in the company, starting from the leadership to down.
We actually had an interesting conversation with the CSO of Aramex, who's a part of this forum and community as well, about how, and he's one of the longest CSOs, standing CSOs in the region, maybe globally, about how he kept his sustainability team small, so the message of sustainability could be taken in at a wider standpoint throughout the company instead of building up walls. But I also just wanted to get your brief comment on talent. You mentioned education is critical, developing talent. From your perspective, and what I see as well in many of these conversations across every sector, acquiring and developing that new talent seems to be a big challenge. And of course, you have the technology and sustainability crossover. What do you think are the next steps that organizations need to focus on in that talent space?
So starting from academia, it should be embedded within the academic fields. I mean, it's only lately where we started seeing development and sustainability within the curriculums of the different universities. But this hasn't been done within, I mean, before the past 10 years, it wasn't even there. So having it embedded within the curriculums and being there is the first start, we can say, because this is one of the things that all of us are utilizing for the learning of ourselves, of our teams. So having the curriculums for that is something crucial that I see that has evolved within the past 10 years massively. And then after that is being open to learning, because when we talk digital and innovation and ChatGPT, as we just said, and AI, and having the digital twins, usually digital comes with a bit of reluctancy from the organizations that not really are aware of that, because they believe this is going to replace them. However, they don't really see how this is going to support them within doing their business and reskilling of their people. So first, embedding the culture, definitely we're part of the companies that don't have that. Being a digital company, but I mean, when we're talking about wider organizations, they usually see this replacing the human element. So ensuring that this is just there to support, and we will need reskilling of the people, and being open to these and have the courage for these changes is something we need to start with, and then moving up to the upskilling and the reskilling of the all the people we have within the organization, not only the sustainability business team, sustainable business team, and this is one of the things we're working on in Vodafone. We don't only educate our people or the teams on the sustainability strategies, ESG, GRI, name it. We as well ensure that this is part of their learnings they get when they join the company.
Ahmed, I want to bring you in as well back, of course, to touch on talent. But first, I also wanted to address a point that May mentioned, which is this cross-sector collaboration, even possibly competitive collaboration as well. But in order for that collaboration to work, not just within each sector, but also across sectors, it requires data. And of course, from developing new products, commercializing new products, data plays a big role of that. Where do you see data at the current moment in sharing and collaboration, and how that can be strengthened around technology?
Well, actually, this is a very important aspect. I mean, if we want to focus on the sustainability sector, like we had a first wave where, like in the paradigm of sustainability, where the word companies, organizations, they've been looking into technologies that's going to enable sustainability. And there are a set of technology sectors and fields that are required, and people will be looking into who are the companies that are working into that field, who are the universities that have set of capabilities. So usually that kind of match by like speaking with subject matter experts. We are working with innovation consultancy companies like BCG and others. Like we conduct secondary and primary research, trying to really understand who are the major players, what are the existing technologies and solutions, and we try to create databases that help us link the dots, see who is working on what. But right now, we're noticing a second wave of the sustainability sector where companies, they became sustainable by nature, sustainable by culture, and they're looking into technologies that are considered as drivers. It's not mainly to enable sustainability, but it's to allow the adoption and the deployment to the market and to the societies, etc. So that even opens the door to broader range of technologies that we will need to look into and we'll try to support. So mainly we are relying on our subject matter experts, collecting data through the innovation consultancy research that we're conducting. And I mean, that's how we are trying to collect the data necessary so that we can work on helping those kind of partnerships. I mean, even in us in RPDC, we are working with several universities. We are adopting co-innovation approaches. And at the same time, we have partnerships with companies. So ourselves are even trying to enhance and establish those kind of partnerships to enable the development and deployment of impactful technologies in broad sectors, including sustainability.
And then again, I just want to touch on the talent aspect. Of course, May touched on it, and I want to sort of lean on your experience at the Rochester Institute of Technology in New York. When we talk about academic, where do you see postgraduate studies playing a role in this ecosystem? And how do you think that we can accelerate that development for future sustainability leaders?
Well, I mean, just before I get into the Rochester Institute of Technology, I want to talk about the talent overall in Saudi Arabia,
Sure.
for example.
Yeah,
So there is, we see that there is no shortage of talent when it comes to developing undergraduates with specialization. I mean, in engineering and science, and also some universities like in KAUST, even graduate masters and PhD with high caliber of research and development and amazing capabilities. But we really see that there is a clear gap when it comes to fulfilling the need of specialized companies, especially in the sustainability sectors. I mean, as you mentioned, fresh graduates, I mean, despite that they come out of universities that offer high value education, they don't get easily attractive opportunities that prepare them to be the next generation tech professionals. There's a good number of talented managers, leaders, strategists, but that's because the nature of jobs available for fresh graduates help them to take that career path. And we have amazing people who are actually shaping the future of the country. But successful tech professionals and tech leaders are typically hands-on. So they've been working long years conducting technical work, gathering technical experience in a specific area. We have such tech professionals in the oil and gas, in the medical field, in certain areas, but manufacturing and advanced technology development is still not very active in the region. But luckily, actually, in Saudi Arabia, we are progressing towards the 2030 vision. We are seeing the announcements of those ambitious projects that focus on technology adoption and building manufacturing capability. So we are ahead of a bright future, but we really need to have those opportunities for fresh graduates who can actually work on building tech careers, so they can be the next generation tech professionals. And as we were talking about, like from my experience in the U.S. and Rochester Institute of Technology, the research and development happening over there. I did my PhD in CAUS, and I see the research and development work actually. It's very comparable. It's very competitive. Actually, some of the organizations in the region even have more advanced capabilities. But again, going back to the industry, most of the research projects happening in the US are backed by the industry. It's not really doing research for the sake of doing research. It's rather than you're really working on specific projects that address specific issues in all sectors. And that's one of the main reasons why the success rate of technology adoption in the US is very high. And most of the time, for example, if you have a PhD or a postdoc developing a specific solution that turned to be of high merit, that company or that industry, they actually work on supporting the establishment of the startup company that's going to introduce that technology to the market, and eventually they will acquire that technology. That's what we see in the Silicon Valley, and that's where we see in many different areas in the US and Europe. This is happening slowly in Saudi Arabia, but we're really trying to increase the momentum and broaden the field where we can have such technologies. But the support for industry is a critical element when it comes to that kind of activities.
Ali, I just want to bring you in to touch on that talent topic as well. If we look at the region, especially the oil and gas companies, a history of actually technology adoption that goes back a long time in order to produce oil and gas. There's some massive sustainability initiatives being implemented by the energy companies in the region. And also they've stepped up, let's say, in this energy security crisis of this past year in terms of supply. But when we look at the younger generation in terms of attracting that talent, there's still that somewhat stigma aspect. How do you think companies can kind of adjust their profile or their value proposition in order to better attract that young and tech savvy generation into these organizations who will undoubtedly be needed in order to reach these sustainability targets?
That's an excellent point, Brian. And I was actually late last year at a panel at ADIPEC discussing some of the same topic, that more or less the same exact topic, Brian, on talent and how can we, speak to the younger talent about the energy and the energy transition. So maybe before I touch on that one, maybe just a little bit on the partnership side, and I'm gonna segue into
Sure.
the talent topic. So obviously, I think my colleagues Maya and Ahmed talked about this quite a bit already, but I just want to emphasize that we all know climate change is not a small problem, and it's not a problem that could be addressed by an individual or a company or one country. Emissions that happen in the East will affect the West and the other way around, right? So whenever we do anything that happens, need industry collaboration, and within the same industry and cross-industry collaboration. We see that happening more and more over the last few years. Within the same industry, let's take for an example a steel industry or a cement industry. There are associations that try to bring the industry together together, align on standards, align on, talent discussions, technologies, etc., to help bridge the gap and share the knowledge, even though they're competitors, but share the knowledge toward a common goal in order to decarbonize cement or decarbonize steel, such as, the World Steel Association, the GCCA, and others, right? And then when we talk cross industries, one industry alone cannot make it happen. Let's take, cement and steel. If I'm producing green cement and green steel and there's no off-taker, there's no one to buy that product from me, I'm not going to be able to actually survive as a company. My shareholders are going to keep actually, they're going to push me to not do so. And that's why you have, associations such as the First Mover Coalition, for example, which was launched a few years ago, that give demand signals. So companies commit to purchasing X amount of green cement and green steel, and then certain amount of technologies. So, and that bridges the gap between supply and demand through partnership. Now building on that same idea of partnership as well could be taken into the workplace and to be think about talent, right? So you have renewable energy companies can work with oil and gas companies, let's say, to try to bridge the talent gap one way or another, right? And then on your more broader question about the region, so the same way that the region here is also is going to be the region is going to lead the energy transition and are forerunners in the energy transition. We know the history of the UAE. Their big investments in renewables over the last 50 years and potential and over the next 50 years, there's huge investments coming up uh, in terms of renewables, green hydrogen, green industries, etc. And for me, the way oil and gas companies can think through this to appealing to the young talent is by basically taking that aspect is we are going to be the providers of green energy. We are the companies that's going to help the world transition from the oil and gas industry into the green economy. And this is basically the future. So climate change and artificial intelligence are the defining problems of our generation and will continue to be for the next 50 to 100 years. How do we embed that within the day-to-day vision of our companies, especially energy companies in the region, would be one of the main reasons that can help attract the new talent. There's no shortage of talent, as my colleague Ahmed just mentioned, and the youth, especially let's say that the young, you know, um, generation that are going through graduate and undergraduate studies, they are passionate about the topics, they are active, they're also, and let's face it, they are the people that are going to be more impacted than the current generation by climate change. Research shows there'll be at least 3 times more impacted by climate disasters, youth. So that's why it's embedded within their, let's say, nature that they want to do something different. And that's why we need to speak to them. And the way energy companies in the region can do that is by crafting their vision around the energy transition and crafting their vision around, we are doing what the world needs in terms of providing the energy for today, but at the same time, we're working for the energy of tomorrow. Because as the leaders of this country say, you cannot flip a switch, but at the same time you need to do everything you can to ensure that the future is sustainable. So that it's, for me, it's a vision, a discussion. It's a discussion of the importance of what's happening today and how the actions of today are building for a future that's green and that's sustainable.
Well, it seems that 30 minutes goes by pretty quickly. Just a quick 30 seconds closing comments. We're leading into COP. It's actually not that far away. What are you looking at in terms of what you think will turn the dial over the next few months, and what are your expectations?
Very honestly, for Vodafone Egypt, as I just told you, we're looking into a more culture change. Like, how can we ensure that all these purpose and sustainability KPIs are embedded within the whole companies and functional KPIs, having it not only in their scorecards, but a belief that they have a role to play within ensuring to have sustainable generations to come, or sustainability for future generations to come. So it's more of a culture change program rather than a framework. We're already past this as a company. I believe we are a purpose-led company, and we do have the tools to mitigate and the innovations to support our customers. But currently we're moving into an internal culture change within the company that can have an impact on the societies in which we operate.
Ahmed, just wanted to bring you back in for your final quick closing comments.
Yeah, I mean, we are here in RPDC. We are on a mission to create an impact to the local innovation ecosystem, to participate in the movement toward decarbonization and the sustainability, which gained a lot of attention actually in the kingdom. It's very well aligned with the Vision 2030. We see a significant drive towards increasing the investment of research and development in green technologies. In our role, we're trying to facilitate the programs that's going to help taking those technologies from the valley of death and introduce it all the way to the market. So the adoption of the technologies by the different sectors that are actually responsible on providing the technologies, the funding, and the introduction to the market. We're trying to be in talks with them, trying to align with this entire movement, and trying to create those high impact startups that's going to help the new generation of technologies that's going to be introduced to the market.
And then Ali, of course, your quick soundbite closing comments. Looking forward to your thoughts.
Thanks, Brian. I mean, looking forward to COP28, what I think, if I want to summarize in 3 words, one is ambition. So I'm looking forward to see more ambition from everyone in terms of, from commitments on greenhouse gas emission reductions to more ambitious finance and more ambitious both commercial finance but also concessional finance that's going to help everyone that's impacted. I look forward to see more innovation. I mean, there's already a lot of that happening, but also innovation in terms of technologies and innovations in terms of solutions that are on the ground, but also, to be honest, innovation of how we do things and how we monitor and how we report and how we do our day-to-day activities when it comes to climate and sustainability. And then finally, I look forward to a cup of action. So basically where we moved, that's been the motto as well of Sharm, but as we go forward into more and more action-oriented projects on the ground, things happening, things moving. And so hopefully that's what we'll see.
And I'll hand it back to our host, Sharif, to let you close out the session.
Thank you, distinguished guests. This was very enlightening, educational, and insightful conversation. As we look towards 2023, the role of technology in sustainability will continue to be pivotal, yet evolving one. We heard things like digital will help achieve your sustainability strategy, but also the need of the tone from the top to drive commitments for all purpose-led companies. Digital will be needed not only to enable mitigation, but also adaptation, loss and damage. And for sure, it needs to be used as a tool to drive the accountability towards the global stocktake. We talked about the need to focus on broader audience, academia, students, working on the future talent, as well as the need to focus on SMEs. We talked about the importance of knowledge sharing, collaboration, and partnerships like we haven't seen before. As much as we are today interconnected, it's one threat. We've never seen that before, the one threat that is actually threatening all the humanity. I remember I say, whether it's a myth or reality, a butterfly can flap its wings in Australia, can cause a hurricane in USA, regardless whether this is scientifically true or not. But we all can agree that the world is deeply interconnected today. Thank you, Brian, Mai, Ali, Dr. Ahmed. This was very educational and looking forward for future ones. Thank you.
And thank you again, everyone, for your time and your insights. For those who are listening to this podcast, feel free to follow them all on social media. And of course, our Gulf Intelligence handle for the published content that will come from it. But thank you again, everyone. I appreciate your time.